Blind bake is when you put like a pie crust in, and I use like baking beans or something that, you know, like some people use macaroni. They put a piece of parchment paper in the bottom, and you weight it down, and you stick it in the oven, and you partially or fully bake the pie crust. Or you do a lot with like custard style pies, because you don't cook the custard style pie long enough for the pie dough to finish. So if you don't do that, then you've got to set custard. Everybody watch the Great British Baking Show. You know how they're always talking about a soggy bottom?
Yeah.
That's where that comes from. It just means that your pie crust hasn't cooked before you serve it. And so that's what I got. I got tired of fighting with it. And I thought, I got to figure out something else, because I'm going to continue to make these. I just want to figure out how to make it. And I got to playing one day, and I had some Bisquick left over. And I thought, I wonder what it would be like if I made a thick biscuit type topping, but didn't use like canned biscuits. I just poured some milk and some Bisquick, made it like I'm going to show you how I made it before, and it came out great. Everybody loved it. It was completely different. It would probably be what I would consider to be a more southern style type thing, because it's going to taste like chicken and dressing. Because one of the seasonings I use is poultry seasoning. I don't use a lot of it. I just use enough of it to give it some taste. But it's really simple. It's very quick. Any chicken, actually, you can make this with any meat you want. I've made it with turkey. I've made it with leftover barbecue. Leftover pork chop, just really anything. I wouldn't call it a chicken pot pie. That's what this is going to be. Yeah, just a pot pie. Or really, it's more like not a shepherd's pie, because that's got like mashed potatoes and ham in it, but in that same thing. And I get rotisserie chicken, or if I happen to have some like leftover chicken breast or whatever, just cube it up, shred it, throw it at the bottom. You partially microwave a bag of frozen vegetables, mixed vegetables, not cooked. Maybe, I think it says cooked at like 6 minutes. I cooked it for like 3, just to get the ice off of it. You pour that in there. I throw some just some hard-boiled egg that I made on top of it. I take a can of I take a can of condensed cream of chicken soup, some chicken stock. I mix it all up. Add my spices. Throw it all in. Mix it up. Make my Bisquick, bread. Pour that all over there, melt a stick of butter, pour that over the top, and go in the oven for about 45 minutes to an hour until the top is done. Because everything in this is cooked. There's nothing wrong. So all you're doing is really you're cooking the biscuit top. And it holds well, it reheats well. The top doesn't get chewy. You know, sometimes with bread or any type of dough, if you reheat it, it gets chewy. And it's fast. So I'm going to talk a lot longer about what I'm going to do to it than it's actually going to be for me to make anything.
The soup that you use, concentrated,
yes,
and you add chicken stock. What if you use regular, not concentrated chicken?
Like regular chicken soup, you're going to have to thicken it, like a lot. You'll have to use a lot of cornstarch to thicken it up. I'll show you. The reason I use this, and I've done it that way, I've used like Campbell's chicken soup before, and what happens is you have water. I mean, it's just soup, even condensed. If you don't, it's very, very thick with water. When you pour that on top of it, that Bisquick sinks to the bottom, rather than like floating on top, which is kind of what this is going to do. But this, I picked up the wrong thing this morning. It should be about 2 quarts at most. This is about 2.5, 3, but it'll still make. It's not that big of a deal. And the great thing about this is that you can shrink the recipe or increase it depending on how many people. This recipe that I made today, I doubled because I'm serving 8 or 9. Well, 8 this time. And then, but normally when I make it in a 2-quart dish. It makes enough for about 4 decent sized servings. And it takes 3 times longer to cook it than it does to actually put it together. Yeah. Or ever how much chicken you want to put in there. And you just kind of go from there. It's really, really easy. So I'm going to stick these in the microwave for I don't know, about 3 minutes just to get the ice off of them. So I'm going to do that really, really quickly. See if I can turn the bucket into it.
Well, I am.
There we go. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my stick of butter in here in just a minute. This can be, it doesn't have to be room temperature, it can be cold because it's going to get melted. So this just goes on the very, very top at the very end. So we'll let that melt. Then at this point, all we're going to do is start pulling the chicken apart. You can use the skin if you prefer, it's up to you. This is all, at this point, this is all personal preference. I use as much of the different parts of the chicken as I can, and I don't cut it or anything. I just shred, pull it apart with my fingers. And I do it with my fingers rather than cut it up because you don't want to get some of that gristle in there or maybe a little bit of bone. So with your fingers, you can feel that. With a knife, you really can't sometimes. If it's a sharp enough knife, it'll go right through. But I'll pull apart, I pull apart light meat, dark meat. And if you get the rotisserie chicken when it's fresh and still warm, hold on to that juice that comes with it and add that instead of using as much chicken stock. That way you get the seasoning of the meat and everything.
Is that what that is, a rotisserie?
Mm-hmm. It's just a rotisserie chicken. I think I got it at Kroger yesterday. And I just pulled it apart. Yeah. Even where was I? I was coming back from Mayfield the other day, and I stopped at Huck's in Lolo, and they had them.
Oh my gosh, really?
I walked in, and the first thing I thought was, "Is that a rotisserie chicken at a gas station?"
At a gas station. Wow.
I mean,
It has a whole little store in there.
oh yeah. Well, and they're building something called Buc-ee's.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
I looked
That's-
that up online, and I thought, good grief, it looks like a super Walmart. It's a gas
The
station.
teenagers loved Buc-ee's. When they were traveling, did mission trip last summer, they stopped at Buc-ee's, and it was like their favorite place to go.
They're all over the Midwest.
Yeah.
They're-
Well,
Texas.
mostly on the East Coast.
On the East, okay.
Southeast.
So what's
Okay,
so,
gotcha.
what's so good about them?
It's everything. They
Yeah.
have it. It's a general store almost.
And they're huge. I mean, it looks like a super
Where are they
Walmart.
building?
Clarksville. I think
Yeah.
right now is where they're building one. When I went into one, or was looking up online, I thought, something like that would be great over there. I'll fix it 3.
They were down in Texas. They were really big down there.
Yeah.
Yes. So.
But, oh yeah, it's becoming sort of a.
And you can shop for clothes there too, and yeah,
They have clothes. They have a.
lots of things.
It's kind of geared for like truck drivers. Like they have a whole place where truck drivers can get something to eat, and take a shower, and
Yep.
rest. And I mean, it's really kind of a neat idea. I think they're known for their barbecue sandwiches or
Yeah,
something.
probably.
I'm not sure. So
Kind of
anyway,
like Casey's is noted for their pizza,
their pizza. Yeah.
which is really good pizza.
So you can use as much or as little chicken as you want. This is really entirely a personal preference. When I send out the recipe, it will have measurements on there, but those are just because it's a recipe.
Guidelines.
Yeah, really. I mean, if you want to make exactly 2 quarts, or like a 2-quart dish full, that would be the recipe that you would use. But if you wanted to make less, just use less. I found an old recipe book. I don't remember where it came from. It was from a little church in Ballard County where I grew up, from like the 1940s, 30s, 40s, and all it had listed was just ingredients. There weren't any measurements. So if you made a cake, all you got was just ingredients.
Flour.
Well, and it was because at that particular point in time, not everybody would have maybe would have had what we would consider now to be a 9x13 pan. They may have had 8x8s or 6x6s, and so they just put it in there. It's like, this is what you do. There are no measurements or anything.
If you watch those cooking shows on TV, they just have ingredients.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even the kids just dump it in. I want a measurement.
Oh, thank you, sir. And all I do is I just put that down there on the bottom.
Just the guy behind the camera.
Right. I a bag of vegetables appears out of nowhere.
It's the hand of God.
That's right. It just comes out of nowhere. Be afraid.
Be afraid.
I was telling the girls when I got here this morning,
Microwave vegetables.
I brought my ingredients in, and I ran upstairs to throw on my choir robes and stuff before, and there wasn't anybody in the choir room. And I got up there and I took my jacket off, and I hear this noise coming from the closet where the men keep their robes. And I thought, what was that? And I thought, oh, something's gotten in there. I thought I was going to open it up and a squirrel was going to fly out at me or something like that. And I opened up the door, and all of our robes were laying on the ground.
Huh?
But the but the robe racks are metal and screwed into the ceiling, so the thing didn't break, and all the robes were laying on the ground with their hangers. So in order to get off of there, something had to lift it up and drop them on the ground. At first I thought maybe Linda was doing the project. I thought, well, she wouldn't just lay our robes in the floor. I mean, they were piled in the floor, but all of them had their hangers in it, so I thought, I just picked them up and I put my robes on. I'm like, now look, I don't know what's in here, but you don't need to be doing that too often. it was a little weird, a little strange.
Yeah, that's
It's a great mystery at Grace Church.
So yeah, once you get your chicken in there, or turkey, or really whatever it is that you want, the only thing that I usually recommend to folks is if you're using any other kind of meat, just make sure that it's cut up into reasonably bite-sized pieces. And you could use as much. Now, some people like to put potatoes in their chicken pot pie. Please do that if that's what you want. Just make sure that they're diced small so that they'll cook. I don't like potatoes in anything. I'll eat potatoes. I don't want potatoes in stuff. Sorry.
Can I use canned potatoes?
Yeah, you can.
Just drain them off?
Drain them off.
Do I
and
rinse
cut-
them
and,
off? Does it matter?
If you wish.
Doesn't, okay,
Mhm. Yeah, if you want to.
okay.
And then all I use, you can use canned potatoes fresh, you can use frozen.
Okay.
Hash browns don't work really well because they hold a lot of water. And all I do is just add, I don't know, I guess the whole bag this time. Usually in a 2-quart container, I use about half a bag or so. But if you like more vegetables, use the whole bag. It's nothing, like I said, it's all cooked. It's not going to hurt anything. And then I add hard-boiled egg. And I had somebody ask me one time.
Hard-boiled egg?
Yeah, hard-boiled egg. They're like, why do you add hard-boiled egg?
that's my
Yeah.
question.
So I had a friend from the United Kingdom, and when they made shepherd's pie, they would put hard-boiled egg, like they cut them in half, and they put them in there as a layer. And I happened to have a couple of hard-boiled eggs handy one time, and I threw them in there, and the yolk acts as like a thickening agent. So
Oh.
when I pour
Huh.
the, I just use, because the yolk, that's like the yellow part will dissolve. It will eventually dissolve into the mixture. And I just like use that as a layer in there. And like I said, this is optional. Egg is optional. If you have it, great. If you don't, no problem. It's not going to change anything. So I add that. And then the next thing I'm going to do is get this disgusting looking thing on the
But that poor chicken.
I know. Well, I bought 2 of these, not knowing how much I was going to have, so better to have too much than not.
God bless the chicken.
That goes straight to the stock pot.
Yeah, I was going to say, I usually will throw that in my stock pot and boil it down. But I use a can of, now, I use cream of chicken, but I tell people all the time, just use cream of whatever. You can use cream of mushroom. I've used cream of mushroom, cream of celery. Cream of celery, if you use cream of celery and you decide to use poultry seasoning, use the poultry seasoning sparingly. Otherwise, it's really going to taste like celery. For some reason, the poultry seasoning brings out the taste of the celery, and that's. I did that one time, and I used the same amount of poultry seasoning that I used when I used cream of chicken or cream of mushroom, and all I tasted was celery. It was like eating a celery stick with biscuit on top. It was kind of gross. So I just pour that in there. Now this is reduced sodium, I think. You can use fat-free if you want. This is a really easy recipe actually to make fat-free. You can use fat-free if you do that. Take the egg yolk, when you go to cut up your eggs, take the yolks out and make sure that they're good and hard. This is the only time I will ever tell anybody to sort of almost overboil your hard-boiled eggs is to use them to cook in stuff, because you don't want them to disintegrate if they're undercooked. But the yolk part of this, if you need to thicken it up a little bit, just use a couple of yolks, mash them up, stir it in there, and it will thicken that up with a little bit of that fat from the yolk. But you don't have to do that.
But then you've got the yolk and the white
Yes.
in there.
Mhm. I usually use both. I just use the whole egg. Yep.
We're not watching our figures right now.
Right. Now, a lot of the times I will take the yolks out and just put the white in there, but I'll slice it. These were diced. Oh, and I found out, my little slap chopper thing that I use does not work well at all with hard-boiled. No.
No.
Not for
No.
now you know.
I slapped that thing down and I pulled it up and it was all smashed into the grid.
Oh.
Well, that's not going to work at all. I mean, it did dice it, but it took me 20 minutes to scrape all that out
Yeah.
with the little scraper. So I learned that the hard way. Yes, sir.
This is different than Campbell's chicken soup.
Well, yes, this is not chicken noodle soup.
But Campbell's does make it.
Yes, they do make it. They do make cream of chicken.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can use that.
Oh yeah. I just picked up Kroger. They were out. Kroger was out of the Campbell's cream of chicken, but they had their brand. And to be honest with you, there's no taste.
There's all different.
Yeah.
Then there's organic
Yeah.
ones. and-
Whatever you
I
want to
think
use.
they're all made at the same place.
Probably so. And then as far as the chicken stock goes, I think the recipe calls for a cup. I don't normally use that much. What I do with this is I just add about, start with about a half a cup, and then as I start to stir it around, what I'm looking for, let me move this over so you can see. What I'm going to end up looking for when I start to stir this around is consistency. I want this to be thinner than pancake batter, but not the consistency of soup. Because when I pour that in, I don't want there to be soup. Because when I dish it up, I don't want it to be watery. That's really what I'm looking for, and that's more of a presentation thing. It's anything else. But when you have something that you pull out of something like that, if it's baked and it's watery, visually it's unappealing. You're almost kind of like, what happened here? Like, was something frozen? Did something come out right? So, what's the first thing that you eat with? Your eyes. So if it looks visually unappealing, it may be the most delicious thing ever, but if it doesn't look pretty or doesn't look good, most of the time people won't try it. That's why you rarely ever see anything made with pears, because when you cook pears, they turn gray. And so, like, I had somebody make a pear tart one time, and they added, what did they add? Red food coloring, like 2 drops or 3 drops of red food coloring. And I'm like, what are you doing that for? And he said, well, let me show you. So he didn't add the red food coloring the next time he made it, and when he served it up, it was just this pile of gray stuff. And I said, I get it now. Totally understand why you added that. So this is just, a little bit too thick for me. So I'm going to add maybe about a tablespoon more. So I can slack that up just a little bit. There we go.
Oh, I see what you're saying. It's kind of that batter.
Yeah. Because what I want is when I pour this in here, I want it to sink into my food, not to sit on top of my food. But I don't want it all to go to the bottom, and we have a watery, nasty mess. Yeah. This is really what we're looking for.
Can we see that?
It's just a little bit thinner than what came out of the can, but it's not soup,
Okay.
like a stew. And if you happen to add too much to it, you can add a little, maybe like a teaspoon of cornstarch and some water, dissolve it in some water, and add it in there until it thickens back up again. if you happen to pour too much in there.
Cornstarch is a great
It
thickening
is,
agent.
or potato starch is good
Oh.
too. Cornstarch doesn't thicken immediately on contact. You have to add a little bit of warm to it just to get it to activate. But potato starch will activate instantly. Like I say potato starch, but it's instant mashed potatoes.
Oh,
So if you ever have something that
I didn't know
changes
that.
the
That's,
flavor.
I did not know that.
potatoes don't inherently have any taste, like spinach. It doesn't taste like anything. And so the only thing that gives potatoes their flavor, or really gives a lot of vegetables their flavor, is the stuff you add to it to get it taste, like salt. So if you ever eat spinach,
Butter.
butter, yeah,
Butter.
you know,
Raw spinach has a flavor.
it has like a earthy, like a little bit of an earthy flavor, yeah, but a flavor of its own. So what you're tasting there are the minerals.
Oh,
Yeah. And I didn't, for the longest time, I didn't know that either. Somebody told me, like, well, spinach doesn't have any flavor. I'm like, how do you know? Well, that protein shake that you're drinking right now, the chocolate one, yeah, say it's got ground up
That's
spinach.
why
in it.
they add spinach to so many
Yep.
things.
It's a really, especially for little kids that don't like their vegetables. I did that a lot for a friend of mine whose daughter refused to eat anything but chicken nuggets, mashed potatoes, and something else, hamburgers. That's all she would eat. But she would drink chocolate milkshakes. I said, well, let's be shady. So they were over at my house one afternoon, and I had a protein. I said, you want a chocolate shake? She said, sure. So I got some, I think I had some soy milk. Did I have soy? Oh, no, I had almond milk. So I used a cup of almond milk, 2 scoops of protein powder, and she went in the other room to do something. While she was gone, I had a container of spinach, and I got 2 huge handfuls of that, and shoved it in there, added the almond milk on it, and put it in the blender, and just let it go. Let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go. And I poured it off into a glass fork, like not a clear glass, but like a plastic glass with a lid. Shrink it down.
Did that turn the drink green?
Sure didn't.
Probably with the chocolate.
With the chocolate.
The chocolate,
it didn't.
yeah.
And even with vanilla, it doesn't really turn it a different color. If you're shady, if you're a little bit more shady and add like some sugar or like Splenda to it, it's kind of like lemon juice. You know how lemon juice will keep an apple from turning brown? If you add a little bit of sugar or something like that to spinach, it will keep that color from transferring. Now, it's not 100% guaranteed. It will shade it some, but it.
My grandson eats all these couch things as while he gets, and they got always almost spinach and then blueberries. I mean, you want a blue pouch or red pouch?
Right. So this is that house seasoning that I made the last time. The reason it's not as red this time is I didn't add as much paprika. It's the exact same stuff.
and what's in your seasoning
It
again?
is garlic powder, onion powder, those little 1 ounce containers, I guess, those little bitty dollar size ones. It's onion powder, garlic powder, black pepper, about 2 tablespoons of black pepper, a tablespoon of salt, and about maybe 2 tablespoons of paprika, regular paprika, not smoked. I don't use smoked paprika because it has a really strong flavor. You can use smoked paprika if you want, you just may not want to use as much. But I add about, that's about a half a tablespoon in here. And then I just stir that around.
Was that on our recipe with the?
No, I don't think it was. And you know, I need to add that.
Yeah.
Just add that in there.
Yeah.
And again, when is the recipes coming out?
Let's see, I sent out that first batch, so probably when I get home and email them to you today.
Grenade.
Right? And I add that.
Kimberly will make sure those are out.
Yeah. And then all I do with the poultry seasoning, I don't use a lot of this. I'm going to say it's probably no more than maybe 1/4 of a teaspoon at the most.
And that's poultry seasoning?
Poultry seasoning. Yeah, poultry seasoning's got like sage and thyme, rosemary. It's used a lot at Thanksgiving. That's what gives cornbread dressing its flavor.
Yeah.
Is poultry seasoning. And I don't use a whole lot of this because sage is one of those kind of like cilantro or whatever. If you add too much to it, it tastes like soap.
Yeah.
So you have to be real careful with it. And you can smell it. I wish you could smell it. I don't know if you all can smell it over there or not. When you add it to there, just waft it up. You can smell the poultry
That smells
seasoning.
like chicken.
Yeah.
You might smell it poultry.
Yeah, oh, yeah. I usually can't smell anything.
So,
Well, it must be pretty strong then. You can smell it.
Yeah.
so just add this to. Scrap out. I just pour this over the top. Back and forth. to make sure that I scrape. Anybody know what this is called in the South? The stuff that's left in the bottom of the bowl, if you don't scrape it out real good, has anybody ever heard the phrase, don't, you're leaving the good, don't leave the good.
Oh.
Oh,
This is the good. Don't waste the good. My grandmother used to say, don't waste that good. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It took me forever to figure out that that's what she meant, the leftover in there. Mm-hmm. Get as much of it out as I can. Now, this part is optional. You don't have to stir it. Because as it heats, it will spread and cook. I just give it a little bit of a turn. Just like this. And all that's doing, really, is just making sure that it's coated.
Now, Jason, if
Ma'am.
you had leftover Thanksgiving vegetables,
Mm-hmm.
you could just use those. They will already be cooked, so
Yep.
you didn't have to do anything to
I've
them.
used green beans, believe it or not. One of the things I did with this a couple of years ago, some friends of mine had some leftovers. They're like, I don't know what to do with these leftovers. I said, well, let's make a pot pie. We made a turkey pot pie. And they had this, somebody went and got one of these great big containers of like cranberry sauce, like the whole berry cranberry sauce. And they're like, I don't know what to do with that. I'm like, serve it on top of it.
Yeah.
With the cranberry sauce on it. It was thick. It was a chunky cranberry sauce. And we made chicken pot pie. We put the cranberry sauce on top of it. And they actually somebody left and drove to a grocery store to get more because we'd run out. And everybody else wanted to try it.
People must love having you come over and make things out of their, whatever they've
Well,
got
so
there.
Don and Barbara, one year we were over at their house. I used to go over and help them put their Christmas stuff up every year. And we were over, it was the day after Thanksgiving, and they had some leftover stuff. And they're like, we need to do something with this turkey. I'm like, well, what do you have in your pantry? Let's look around and see what we have. They had some pecans, they had this, they had that. So we chopped up, what did we make something like a turkey tetrazzini, I think, or something like that? No, it was almost like a turkey pot pie, but it had like turkey salad. That's what it was. We made a turkey salad. We chopped it up. We put the pecans and some brown sugar and cinnamon, toasted them up, threw them in there.
wow.
Used the cranberry sauce that they had to make a dressing out of. They had some salad mix. We put it all together in a salad. We used the cranberry dressing or the cranberry sauce as the dressing, and we had pecans on top of it. And that's what we had.
Sounds good.
Sounds yummy.
It's easy. We just do stuff together. That's how most of this stuff happens. Is you throw stuff together. Now I'm using the Kroger brand baking mix. This is Bisquick. It's the same stuff.
Is it?
Yeah, they all they had yesterday was a little bitty box of the regular Bisquick, and I thought, well, this is the same. I'm going to use more than that little box. And the only other thing they had was a bag of this stuff. And I thought, I don't need that much. So the recipe calls for 2 quart calls for about a cup. Try that again. I'm going to add, I don't know, that much. Probably a cup and a quarter to a cup and a half. And believe it or not, at this point, really, it doesn't really matter. Because what we're going to do here is I'm going to end up pouring this over the top here. And this will rise like a biscuit when I add the milk to it.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just going to go through and knock the clumps out of it, really, more so than anything. And then, anybody in here ever made biscuits?
Yes.
Oh, yep, yep.
So instead of using ice water, cutting in butter, all that kind of thing, I use whole milk. And I'm going to start off with about, I don't know, half a cup to 3/4 of a cup. And I'm going to stir this until it starts to come together. Now, the consistency that I'm looking for here is thinner than a cake batter, but not quite waffle or pancake batter. Can you all see?
Yeah.
So this is where you just, again, you start eyeballing stuff. There's no right or wrong way, because I'm not adding anything to this but Bisquick and milk.
That's it.
That's it. It's just Bisquick and milk.
You don't need an egg or anything. Oh, wow.
Sure don't. Because it's got the raising agents and everything in it already.
Okay.
So that's too thick, so I just keep adding. What's the other trick, what's the other thing about baking that we always say? You can do what, but you can't do what.
You can always have it, you cannot take out of it.
You know what the difference is in this and that recipe and that saying? You can here. You can't take the milk out, but you can add more Bisquick.
Ah, very good.
Yes.
My mom always says that
It's
when
alive.
she makes deviled eggs, because
Yeah.
Granny taught for the filling, she's like, about this much peanut butter,
There's
about
no
this much
measurements.
mayonnaise.
Right.
I was like, what are the measurements? There are none.
Right. Well, that's like
When
every
you
time.
taste it, that's when you know
Yeah,
it's right.
that's like every time my grandmother would cook anything, she used a different cup. She'd use a coffee cup. She'd use a
Whatever
Demi-Tasse
cup
cup.
was there.
Yeah,
Oh
whatever
my
she had
God,
in
that's
front of her.
hilarious.
Yeah, and so I can remember when I was trying to learn from her. You know, I was learning to cook from my mom, who learned to cook from her mother, who had measuring cups and stuff. My grandparents weren't wealthy or anything like that. They grew up on farm. They were farmers. They did everything that they
But
could.
they had measuring cups.
Oh, well, I mean, my grandmother, my dad's mom and dad, she just grabbed what was in front of her face.
That's fun.
And that's what she used. And so every time she made a jam cake, it would either make 1 to 4 levels, just depending on what she grabbed, how much she had on hand.
4 levels
Yeah.
of whatever.
Or whatever, yeah.
The cup
So
or-
if she would always ask, the one thing she would always ask, like Saturday night, she'd call and talk to all of the kids, y'all coming over for lunch tomorrow? She'd get a head count. And that's how she knew how much to make. You know, if she knew about 10 people were going to come over, she'd know to make maybe a 3 or 4 tier jam cake or a couple of chocolate pies instead of 1 chocolate pie. I wish I could make her light rolls, but that recipe unfortunately went with her.
Oh, God bless her.
Fried chicken.
Our loss.
Yeah. So we're about to get there. This is still just, I mean,
A little thick.
a
Yeah.
tad too thick. I'm going to turn a little bit more milk here. So all in all, I probably added about 1 1/4 cups, maybe between 1 1/4 cups and 1 1/2 cups of milk. But again, all I'm looking for here is a particular consistency. So see, we're kind of at the cake batter stage.
Oh, sure.
And then what I'm trying to do is not get to the pancake stage. And I think I got it. There we go. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. So yeah, like a really slack cake batter is what I got right here. Pourable, but not running. Now, if you want to add some pepper to that, you can. You can even add spice to that if you want to. It's not going to change the way it cooks. So even though there's salt in this, it won't. There's enough of the other stuff. There's enough of this to offset what you add here, if you wanted to.
And you use paprika, right?
Yeah, you can use.
Oh, my mom has a celery seed paprika crust that you make for.
There you go. I've
I don't
used
do it on the
rosemary
bottom, it's just on top.
in here before.
Oh.
I've used rosemary
Paprika.
or Italian seasoning.
That sounds
And
good.
I've made like, I've actually made this before as rolls, like light, and and you just cut them like into sort of like
When you put
half
rosemary,
cornbread.
when you put rosemary in, do you take dried rosemary and chop it up really small?
Well, what I'll do is I'll take the dried leaves. I have a mortar and pestle at home, and I'll put them in the bottom and crunch them up to release some of the oil.
So
Oh,
Jason,
yeah.
if I were using like ham,
Mhm.
and could I put cheese in
Yeah.
that?
Yes, In here? Yeah.
Right in that?
You sure
Just
can.
Like a shredded cheese? Just
cheese is a
to-
binding agent. Yeah. So all it's going to do is just bind it together. Now, depending on the kind of cheese that you use, so like I wouldn't use like a mozzarella, because
Okay.
mozzarella cheese has water in it.
Uh-huh.
And so what it might do is it might cause your dough to kind of fall apart. But if you use a cheddar cheese, it'll help to hold it together. American cheese might make it dense because American cheese is a lot of oil and processed stuff like Velveeta.
Okay. So, okay.
Yeah, so because that doesn't necessarily melt as much as it does get soft because it's already melted. It just gets softer. And so when that happens, it tends to make things dense, or can make things dense, because it doesn't really do anything other than just get soft. And then when it gets cold, it stiffens back up again. But you can use whatever you want. I've had people use Velveeta and they love it. Well, that's what you want to do. And all I do, this is called floating it on the top. If you pour it over this and it sinks, it's too thin. This needs to sit right on top.
But you can't get it back.
Right.
Yeah, because it's gone. Man.
It's gone in there. Now, the good thing, though, about using something like this is because this is a little less dense than the stuff that I've got underneath, it will push itself up to the top. But you will have some wet dough down inside your, it's my timer. Oh, good, it's done. Couldn't have planned that if I had to.
Wow.
I tried.
Look at you.
You all make me a space right there between the milk and the spices.
I wonder what Marie Callen about all this.
And then to make sure that it's done, just it should be done, because if it's brown like that on top,
Yeah,
it'll be
yeah.
done.
It's
You
all
can do
bubbly,
you can
too.
do the check on this as well. If you stick that in there and it comes out with anything on it, it still needs maybe another 2-3 minutes or so. But as that sits, it's going to condense back down again. So yeah, that's what it will look like when it's done.
After.
And this is the before. And all I do is just push this to the side. I'm not sealing it or anything like that because I didn't do that. And see how it expanded? When I poured this in here, it was probably, I would say, about like this. So it will spread and,
Oh, okay.
yeah, I just kind of push it over just to make sure it's level so we don't have like big lumps of stuff in here. And then everybody forget about the stick of butter and stuff
Oh,
on it?
yeah.
Don't forget your butter. And all I do is pour this right over the top, just like this.
That's what's made it so lovely.
Oh, look at that.
Very buttery buttermilk biscuits we do.
So plus pot pie.
And then this goes in a 350-degree oven until the top is done. So that's going to vary depending on your oven. This went in for an hour, but it was because I didn't know that this oven was 25 degrees cooler, and it said it was. But 350, stick it in there for about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. Just check it. When you can smell it, check it. You'll smell the seasoning first, but it's not the seasoning you're sniffing for.
I was gonna say, but can you smell it?
Mm.
Even
Smell.
I.
Even you can smell it?
Well, if I take allergy pills,
Then you can smell it.
It's not a really nasty day.
And that's the finished product.
Golly.
Very impressive.
Very nice.
And like
Jason.
I said, it's a much different way of preparing. It's quicker. You don't have to worry about rolling. You don't have to, if you don't want to use refrigerated dough, you don't have to. And again, most people have this stuff already in their pantries. If you don't have this quick, you can, if you want to make biscuits, just make biscuits. Just don't cut them out. Just put the biscuit dough on top. Make sure it's not too thick. Just spread it out on top and bake your biscuits in the oven. The bottom part, it doesn't matter what the temperature is. It's all cooked. If we were cooking something raw in there, then yes, you definitely would want to make sure all that kind of thing. But if you wanted to use, just like if you wanted to make plain old regular homemade biscuits and slap those on top, do it and bake it at 425 for 20 minutes. It'll be done. It'll just be hot.
Will you ever use puff pastry and put it on the bottom,
Mhm.
not cooked,
Same thing, doughy.
doughy?
I've used,
So you-
I have used puff pastry. I have made puff pastry. I've used rough puff. I've used shortbread, like a savory shortbread. It's just it's the nature of the liquid that you put in the pot pie that makes it end up being doughy.
So if you wanted to use puff pastry, you could just put it on the top.
Yeah, and that's how a lot of places make it. They'll use what they'll end up doing. What I've seen a lot of places do when they make chicken pot pie. It's not actually baked. What they do is they bake the crust.
And then pour it
They
on.
pour the custard in the middle of it, and then they'll take an already cooked top and sit it on top of it.
Oh, okay.
So that's when it comes out. That's why it's so good and crisp and crunchy. Is
Okay.
because it's not been baked. The act of baking this right here changes the consistency of that dough, and it gets doughy on the bottom. I have never, and some people are better at it than me, and I'm not going to say I'm perfect at anything like that. They're like, oh, every time I make it, it turns out great. Well, good for you.
But I can see the layers
Yeah.
of what you prepared with the previous one,
Mhm.
and you could see where and why that dough would not ever
Uh-huh.
get crispy on the bottom.
Yeah. Even when you, like I said, even when you blind bake it, for as long as you have to stick that in there, even if it's at 425 for 15 minutes, that custard is still going to boil. And that's what causes your dough to get mushy.
All nasty. Wow.
Yeah, but the puff pastry is actually, I've done that before. On a smaller scale, you just put some puff pastry on the top, put your dough, or butter, so that it will rise and have a nice brown top to it. And it's really good.
So all the stuff you see in the freezer section that is chicken pot pies or whatever, it's all been pre-cooked, and they just put it in the pie crust that's already been cooked, baked.
Right, baked. And then when you go and heat it, what you're really doing is thawing it out. You're not actually cooking anything. Frozen food, you're not cooking them, you're thawing them out. They're cooked. All you're doing at that point is you're just thawing it out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. This looks
Unless it
lovely.
specifically says this is not a cooked product, when you go and get like a banquet lasagna or Salisbury steak, that's all cooked. All you're doing is thawing it out.
I think that looks really
Wow.
pretty.
Looks lovely.
Coffee does?
My thought would be you can mix with all that those black olive or something to give it a little,
Pizzazz.
yeah.
And then as far as like a side, somebody asked me one time, what do you want to serve on the side? Everything you need's in there, unless you want to serve a salad
Spinach salad.
A cold salad or
Yeah.
some kind.
on the side.
Well,
Cranberry sauce.
I mean, if you're in the South, it's got to be gelatin.
Gelatin or banana pudding.
Oh, banana pudding.
Banana pudding.
Now, I was serving up in Minnesota as a priest,
Mhm.
and all my brothers and sisters that are Lutherans, they love their Jello salads,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
and so they would always bring Jello salads
funny, though.
with fruit in it.
Up north, everybody, when they say Jell-O salad, everybody knows what that means. And I'm like, what is a Jell-O salad? I had no idea. I had a bunch of friends that were from like Wisconsin, Milwaukee. I'm like, what is Jell-O salad? Like, I was thinking it was like lettuce with Jell-O in it. I didn't know what they meant. And then somebody made it. I'm like, oh, you mean ambrosia. We know it as ambrosia or like a, what do you call it, marshmallow salads.
Oh,
Same thing.
really?
Yes. It's the exact same thing. They kept talking about Jell-O salad, and I thought, that is just repulsive. Because all I could think of was somebody took green Jell-O or orange Jell-O or whatever and threw it in their spinach salad with ranch dressing on top. I mean, it was just,
Yeah,
the thought of it was
yeah.
grossing me out. I just didn't
So
know
you
what
call it
was-
ambrosia?
Yeah,
Here
there is
in
something
the
called
South?
ambrosia.
Okay.
But there's marshmallow salad, is what my grandmother always called it, and that was Cool Whip.
Oh yeah.
Jell-O, whatever flavor Jell-O, and a lot of times they came in two colors, green or orange. Because you could throw cherries in with the green
That's right.
for Christmas,
Yep.
and then you could throw little mandarin oranges in with the orange for the summer. And that was the only time you ever saw that stuff. Christmas? I don't know why Christmas.
It's green red.
I guess.
Green and red, that's right.
The only time we ever saw
You got it,
Christmas
Emily.
and 4th of July. But when you cut into it, got my asbestos fingers here, it holds together.
Look at that.
I'm just grabbing.
Wow.
So, you see, it's kind of hard to see. Can you all see how thick the top is? If you don't care for it being that thick, the fix for that is you can either make less of the topping or put more of the bottom.
So that makes it.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I always tell people if you don't like the thickness of the top, just add more at the bottom. Add more chicken. Add more,
Yeah.
you know.
That is really cool.
That's basically how I make mine.
And roughly, how much would this cost, Jason?
Well, believe it or not,
Is it a spoon or fork?
however you want to eat it. It's thick enough. It's thin enough for a spoon, thick enough for a fork.
Oh, let's do both.
If you don't have like the Bisquick and all that kind of stuff on hand, and you were to buy it, like if this was $2.60, 70 cents for this box.
Uh-huh.
And you add the chicken stock, if you were to have to buy all of this, including the rotisserie chicken and the eggs and everything, it might cost you $20.
Okay.
2021, but most people already have eggs, they'll already have milk of some kind, and you do not have to use whole milk, by the way. you can use whatever milk you want. All you're looking for is a consistency. Only reason that I use whole milk is because that's the first thing I saw when I was at Courier. So I'm like, just grab me a half a gallon. Stephen was looking at me like, what kind of milk do you want? Just grab me a half a
Now,
gallon.
could you use,
Oh, okay.
can you use soy milk or
You
almond
can.
milk?
Yep. Like I said,
Oh,
all
wow.
you're really looking for is just a consistency. Now, with your almond milks and your soy milks, though, they're thinner.
Okay.
So you may have to use, when you add your butter to it, use a little bit more butter than you would if you were not using because there's like skim milk, it's mostly water. Soy milk and almond milk is a lot of water.
You've got some hungry people here.
Oh yes, I'm sorry. We're sorry. It's still hot, so you will be careful. Ma'am.
Jason, you bought a container of chicken stock. When I make chicken stock, I have a whole little box of little cubes that I mix up with
The
salt water.
bouillon? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can use that too. The only reason I had to, that's just what I had in my pantry. I have bouillon too, as well. You know, I've got,
I would never buy that. I just buy those little cubes.
yeah, that's fine.
And I'm thinking that might be cheaper.
Oh yeah, by and large it is. I use a lot of chicken stock. I use rice, spaghetti noodles. I put a lot of stocks than I do anything else. I don't care much for the taste of city water. And I've gone through so many water purifiers. I just decided to start cooking a lot of it with stock.
God bless our food. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Biggie.
Amen. Amen for the cook. God bless you, Jason. I'm glad you're feeling better too.
Yeah, that was a short-lived whatever.
Last week, yeah. Was it a upper respiratory thing?
It's something. It kind of hit me.
It was something.
It hit me late Thursday afternoon into Friday morning, and I didn't know what it was. I tested negative COVID and flu,
Yeah.
but I mean, I felt really, really bad. Running, not high fever. Well, high fever for me it was 101. But I went to the urgent care, and she said you probably got that adult RSV, and I ended up losing my voice. So
Yeah, this was a week ago, so
yeah. So, yeah.
we don't have to worry about you right now.
No, it's
Good, it has a different, I can say it has different texture.
Texture.
yeah, like a different taste. Yeah, it's the corn. It's more like a biscuit top. It's kind of like eating biscuits mixed in with your. But if anybody needs salt and pepper, let me know.
I like the crunch mixed in with it.
Is it okay?
How is it, everybody?
It's really good.
Yeah.
You liking it?
Really good.
Kate, what do you think? It's too hot still, or?
I'd say it's probably pretty hot. Don't burn your tongue.
Blow, something.
Yeah. Look at that. Looks beautiful. Well done. Well, thank you very much,
You're
Jason.
welcome. Like I said, this is a complete. It takes longer to cook. And 9, yeah.
Yeah, it serves about 9 people.
9, 10. Well, it could probably serve 12, but I made bigger servings so everybody had enough.
Yeah. So next week, what are you
Next week-
making?
So next week, I put on there, was it brunch and desserts? I think that's the last class. So I'm going to actually make 2 things. I'm going to make a brunch dish called shashuka. If you've never had that before, that is a Israeli sort of Middle Eastern style dish. It's really very simple. It's it's just crushed tomatoes with some bell pepper in it, a little bit of warm spice called ras al hanout. And I'll bring that in if you want to check. You cook that down. You crack eggs in the top and let them poach in that sauce, and you serve it on top of like a crusty white bread.
Nice.
That's that. And then the dessert I'm making is called gorilla. I call it gorilla bread. It's monkey bread, but the biscuits are stuffed with cream cheese. So it's that's really the only difference between that and monkey bread. So
We're an easy crowd, you know.
And both of them are brunch, or one of them is a dessert and the other one's a brunch.
So some of the background noise you're hearing is some of our youth playing around out here. All right, Jason. Well, thank you very much. Hey, Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm getting a sample.
I was going to say, please get a sample.
Oh, yeah, there's another one cooking.
So thank you, Jason, for making us our chicken pot pie here at Grace Episcopal Church. We'll see you next time. And what are we making again next week?
Brunch and dessert, so we're going to make shashuka and gorilla bread.
There we go. So tune in next week for our next Cooking with Jason.
Go.